We do anticipate this lasting about an hour. So thank you for joining us at this time. If you are not a panelist, please mute your microphone. We have a tremendous number of pre-registered attendees, so do stay muted throughout the event unless you submit a question. I call on you to either ask it, preferably submit your questions in the text box, either publicly or directly to me, and I'll tend to them as best I can. We do have a few questions that we absolutely want to hit on that will take up a good portion of at least the front half, if not a little bit more of this discussion, but then we'll proceed on to kind of an open Q&A. Unfortunately, given the depth of this topic and how much we could debate it and dissect it as much as possible, we probably will not get to every question out there, but we'll do the best of what we can. So as not to take up any more of your time, I want to introduce this Dean's panel and thank them for joining us. We have Michael Stratton with Georgia College and State University. He's also the president of MOBTS. We have Barbara Ritter of Jacksonville University. We have Kenneth Rhee of Nazareth College. And we have Erica Small of Coastal Carolina University. Amongst those institutions, we have a bit of a variety of student population, both in total and amongst the undergraduate and graduate populations, public versus private institutions. We have two of each on this panel. But at this time, I would like each of our panelists in the order that I just mentioned you, being Michael, Barb, Ken, and then Erica. If you can briefly introduce yourselves and your institution before we dive into some of these questions. Michael?
Sure. Well, thanks everybody. Great to see everyone. As I joked earlier before it went official, I'm on day 57 here as the new dean of the J. Whitney Bunting College of Business. Georgia College and State University is a public liberal arts university with about 6,500 students. And the College of Business, we have both undergraduate and graduate programs. We have about 64 faculty and staff in the College of Business, and about 2,500 students. So that's a little bit about us, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity tonight.
Barb?
Barbara Ritter. I'm dean at Jacksonville University. And if I'm looking over here, it's because you're all over here on my second screen. So I've been here since July 1. Previously, I was dean at Coastal Carolina University. So I went from a public of about 10,500 to a much smaller, a few thousand students at a private institution. It's much more urban and right across the river from the city. So we have a good population of graduate students as well as a good population of online learners that would certainly impact the situation that we're facing right now. Only 1,400 students living on campus. So that may become pertinent later. Been a dean for not quite a decade, I guess probably about 7 years now. Proud member of MOBTS for much longer than that. I will turn it over to, who's next, Erica or Ken?
Ken is next.
I think I'm next. Hello, everybody. My name is Kenneth Rhee. I'm the dean of the School of Business and Leadership at Nazareth College. This is starting my third year, so I was told that I could no longer use the word new, so I'm no longer a newbie when it comes to being here. And we are a very small liberal arts college with professional schools. So we have about 2,000 undergraduate students with 1,000 graduate students, 3,000. And I'm going to talk about this later, but under COVID-19, small is beautiful. Being small, I think we can manage our students much more effectively. Let's see, our school has we're very small. One of the reasons I got hired was to grow and expand the school. We have about 300 students, undergraduate students, and about 100 graduate students. Next.
Erica?
So hi, I'm Erica Small, and I am the interim dean at Coastal Carolina University in the Wall College of Business. So I am Barb's replacement when she left. So before that, I was chair of the management department in the same college for about 7 years. So she kind of introduced Coastal a little bit. We are a public institution, about 10,000, 10.5 undergraduate students. And we do have master's level programs and some doctoral programs, though not in the College of Business. In the College of Business, we have about 2,000 students and relatively small but growing MBA and MAC program as well, about 100, 125 students, something like that. And I think that's it for now.
Thank you. Thank you. So generally speaking, a lot of people are here to somewhat compare and contrast what their own institutions have been doing in the face of COVID, both in terms of preparation, safety, health, and budgetary concerns and things like that in terms of cutbacks and even furloughs and layoffs. So somewhat, again, we're going to stick with the same order for now with this rather basic question, but can you give us an idea of what each of your institutions, what lengths your respective institutions have gone to in order to promote not just a healthy, but a desirable learning environment for your students?
Yeah, well, it's been ongoing prior to my arrival. I think when Georgia College went in the University of Georgia system, which is important to note that we are part of the University of Georgia system, which my experience so far has told me that it's fairly centralized in terms of decision making, but they went online in spring and continued through the summer. And so there was a considerable amount of communication with the faculty and students and staff about next steps. And so when I arrived July 1, they were in the midst of preparing for student arrival and preparing for face-to-face. And that has been the plan since then. So you can imagine the PPEs and variety of technology that we've brought into the classroom for high flex teaching and learning. But our orientations for new students, undergraduate and graduate, our commencement were all virtual, or convocation, excuse me. But I have to think, one of the things that I was impressed with here is we have a process for accommodations for faculty and staff who have comorbidities and who may be at a higher risk. So we've seen some of our courses go online, and we actually have processes for students who are also at risk for for them to seek alternative learning arrangements. We are, as of this morning, about 80% of our courses are face-to-face, and I will say that has been that's been a challenge to get to that number. We're seeing ebbs and flows of students going in and out of quarantine, and you can imagine from a faculty perspective that becomes a challenge when a third of your students, for instance, are out for a week or a week and a half. I will say that our tutoring has been also virtual for the most part, which has been helpful for students who are finding themselves in quarantine or finding themselves having 2 out of 5 classes virtual because their faculty members teaching virtual this year. This has been a bit of a double-edged sword, but I'm still in support of it. We're extremely transparent with our test positives for COVID-19. I think that as a public institution, that transparency is really critical for a variety of accountability reasons. But I think it's giving a good sense of the tracking that we're doing and the testing that we're doing. And I think that for some has been putting them at ease. Others, it's creating anxiety. But I think for the most part, we are trying to focus on where we're doing well and where we could improve day by day. So I've been pretty impressed by the collaboration that's been happening.
All right. So at Jacksonville, the Dean of Students was charged with leading the committee that would guide us safely back to campus. It was decided we would need to be in person because this is part of our distinctive advantage. Small, private, one-on-one individual attention. Students come here because they want to be on campus and have that experience. So we started off with that assumption, which is unfortunately right now part of the weakness of the model of higher education, isn't it? So we needed to have some sort of experience for the 18-year-olds to enjoy, and so we needed to do it safely. And so they worked with the Mayo Clinic, which was fortunate because Jacksonville is a pretty big healthcare mecca, and we have those connections here to our campus. And that made me feel a little bit better. We also followed very closely the CDC guidelines, which made me feel a little bit worse because they keep getting more lenient as days go by. For example, we required if somebody was tested positive, they would have had 2 negative tests before they could come back to campus. Now CDC guidelines say that once they're symptom-free, they're good. So following CDC guidelines, actually for me, is more worrisome. But we did have those policies, procedures in place. We bought the PPE. We required our faculty to teach in person as well as synchronously online and asynchronously. So faculty are doing it all, and we recognize they are doing it all. The equipment is in the classroom, so they are able to do this. We use Blackboard, Collaborate, so they can record it and save it for asynchronous, but they can also broadcast synchronously while there are people in the classroom. There are many rules in place for the people that are face-to-face. So in all buildings, you will wear a mask, and the students very good job. Faculty wear masks, everybody's masked. And we have half or less than room capacity in the room at once. We've taken away all the chairs and blocked the spaces to ensure they're sitting 6 feet apart at all times and masked. So it seems to have worked quite well so far. The students are complying, they wear their masks. By and large, I think I did see one faculty without a mask, which was kind of funny, right? So, but they're complying with the policies set forward. Faculty have been very good. I know that was an ask for them to have to be more flexible in so many regards. They were able to apply for accommodations through HR if they wanted to be all online, and some faculty did. But the majority of our faculty are teaching face-to-face, very small class sizes. So you might see 6 or 10 in a room. The others are cohorted and watching synchronously, Blackboard Collaborate. And then if a student gets sick, the asynchronous is available for them. So we're being maximally flexible. And the faculty, I must say, we had a lot of sessions before the semester started about how to adapt your pedagogy to this when you have to engage people virtually in Zoom or Blackboard at the same time as you have a few people that can't get close to each other in a classroom. And I think that it will ultimately push us, we'll learn to be better teachers in the end once we get past the pandemic. Over though to Ken.
Thanks. I do have to say that Brandon sounds so much better than you, so there must be something going on between you two. He must be holding the bandwidth of the household. Anyway, I have to say that we are lucky to be in New York State. Now, if you asked that question in last March, you probably start laughing at it because New York obviously had one of the highest COVID-19 infection rate. But now it has one of the lowest. And the governor has done a highly effective job in terms of doing a mask mandate, social distancing. And I have to say that being in New York these days, we feel lucky to be in New York State. And he's enforcing the social distancing regulations. He's been closing down bars and other restaurants that do not adhere to their regulation and mandates. So I think the enforcement has been very effective. So we are in that environment. So I think that's been great for us because the students coming in recognize that it's not just us who are enforcing the masks and social distancing mandates, but it's the whole state who's doing it. And a lot of our students do come from the Northeast. So that also helps us in terms of not being able to quarantine students, because New York State now has the quarantine requirement for, I think we have about 30 states on the list. So if you happen to come from one of those states to New York State now, you have to be quarantined for 14 days. So, but most of our students do come from Northeast. So that actually helped us. So we are strictly enforcing social distancing. In fact, it was so funny during the summer that I saw one of the classrooms, and typically we have about 40 students in that particular classroom, and now we're down to, I believe, 16 because of social distancing requirement. In fact, I saw the folks from the facilities management going into the classroom and measuring the distance between the chairs so that we maintain that 6 feet. We distribute the hand sanitizers to every student, and we clean classrooms in between sessions. Students actually help out in terms of cleaning the classrooms, and they've been very good in terms of wearing masks. We just had our first weekend, so hopefully there weren't too many off-campus parties, but so far so good. We have been very fortunate that the students seems to be very cooperative. I haven't seen any students abusing any regulation on campus. Everybody's wearing masks everywhere on campus, in classroom, outside the classroom. As long as you're on campus, you have to wear a mask. So students have been very cooperative in terms of doing that. And also faculty has been highly effective in terms of working with the students. We have about less than 10% of our courses are online, and most of our courses are either in person or hybrid, which means they probably meet every other week. And I think the students are very happy to be back on campus. I talked to a few of my students, and few of them said wearing masks beats staying home with their parents for the entire summer. So they are so enthusiastic and eager to be back on campus, being away from their parents. So so far, so good. Thank you. Next.
So a lot of what we're doing at Coastal is very similar, actually, to what's already been said. I will say what I don't think I mentioned before that you may or may not know is Coastal Carolina University is located in South Carolina, just outside of Myrtle Beach. So those of you who came to MOBTS 2018, is that right? 2018? Time is strange right now, but anyway, 2018 you visit our campus, and so if you were watching the news, we've had the opposite experience of Ken. So Myrtle Beach became a hotspot right around July, and so that's been a bit of a struggle. Because of that, largely because of that, we opened online, so on August 19th, with the plan to go in person on September 8th. So right now we are in a situation where, well, I'll back up a minute and say one of the things that might be unique relative to the other colleges that the deans that have already discussed is that we did begin to go through sort of an ADA process for faculty to request online accommodation. But the problem with that was that there were more faculty who maybe didn't meet sort of a criteria of a health-related need, but still didn't feel comfortable being face-to-face. And so our provost took a bit of a gamble, to be honest, and allowed all faculty to choose their modality. So, and then the flip side of that is that all students also get to choose their modality. That is to say, whether they give their class or take their class in a classroom versus streaming outside of the classroom. The caveat to that for faculty as well is that although they could change their originally in-person class to streaming, they did have to stream. So we didn't allow a switch to sort of an asynchronous online model. There is still synchronous connection to students to try to maintain the interaction with students and to maintain their schedules. And so we've seen a lot of shifting of students. So as students select, so they're kind of shifting back and forth between whether they want to stream when September 8 comes and maintain in this online modality, or whether they want to go into the classroom. And all of that will sort of determine what the classroom looks like. Our classroom situation, I think, is very similar to the others. So that is to say, there's distancing. Of course, we require masks, no congregation. We've physically removed all the seating in the hallways. It looks very different. And actually, one of my chairs today was asking, can we please, alongside the "Do not congregate" sign, can we also say "Welcome, we're glad you're back"? So we're working on that, and to have our e-boards have like waving, we're glad you're here, but keep moving. So it is a strange balance between safety and, how is the question and desirable. Being safe and being desirable has been the challenge. We have a fairly large campus. We expect about 4,000 students to live on the campus. We have allowed them to move in as early as August, even though we're online until September. I kind of expected the move-in to be delayed to September, but in fact, about 3,300 of those 4,000 students moved in August. So kind of they're ready to get out of their house, or their parents are ready for them to get out of their house. But you see them kind of walking around, but they seem to be doing what they're asked, that is, not congregating, wearing their masks, and so on. The question remains, what do they do outside? But to accomplish all of this flexibility and faculty and student being able to choose, what we've done is really invested in mobile technology. So iPads, essentially, we've purchased iPads, styluses, and they will serve, and all the peripherals. So the lapel mics and the adapters and the app technology, everything, the integration of all the technology, such that Zoom and Microsoft Teams all integrate with Moodle, and sort of a one-click kind of option to integrate those applications, and provide the ability for faculty to, when they can, come into the classroom, set up their iPad, connect it with their laptop device, and sort of exist with their in-person classes, likely cohorted to meet the restricted side of the classroom, and then also meet the needs of the students streaming. So as Barb was saying, it is kind of certainly, not kind of, it's certainly a demand on faculty's resources. I've been very impressed with what they've done, and just the adaptation to what's being asked, and the sharing of information. So those people who have adapted more quickly have been phenomenal in getting that out, making videos. Hey, I learned how to spotlight, and how to use the iPad and the laptop to spotlight a person, and then you can write your equations. And so some really specific applications that, skills that people are learning, that they're sharing with their colleagues, and that's been really fantastic, and hopefully tools that can be used even after this. So
Thank you. So my first follow-up is, can you hear me okay? Because I just swapped mics with Barb. You're good? Okay, great. To our Dean's panel, the next two questions that you saw on your list, I want to lump together a little bit, because I want to make sure that, I had a little bit of fear about time to begin with. I want to make sure we're going to get to some kind of open-ended, questions from the audience here. But as we all know, heading into this, towards the end of last year and through the summer now and into this fall semester, we all kind of expected some immense economic repercussions from the pandemic, whether that be from state funding, private funding, students no longer wanting to learn virtually, taking a year off, etc. You're all connected within the Dean community. You all have your kind of ears to the ground. You know what's going on. So when you answer this question, you do not need to answer it per your institution in any way, but just kind of your generalized crowdsourced knowledge from speaking to fellow deans is just fine. So as the semesters have either just started or are about to start, the first part of this question is, to what extent have we seen a reduction in students in business schools, whether graduate or undergraduate or graduate, and university as a whole? So since funding is there's also kind of a pool for the funding, and then following up on that with any kind of assumed reduction of students and revenues, et cetera. What areas are you seeing budgets get hit? How deep do you expect some of these cuts to be? And maybe most importantly, how long do you see these playing out, or are you already seeing some acknowledgement of things may not be as bad as we initially thought, and we're going to kind of slightly get back to normal moving forward? So kind of a long question there. If you need me to, when it comes around to your turn, if you need me to hit upon any of those points again, those questions, just let me know. But Michael, first off to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start by saying it. It's not an understatement, right, for everybody in this Zoom room tonight to know the anxiety that's shared by everyone. And I do want to go back a bit to the first question because it is related. We've been focused on trying to give as much discretion as we can to the faculty, and I think that while we're physically distanced, we're requiring masks, we're using technology. For those faculty who are facing this day to day, they are, and the students, they want to be here, but they understand how difficult it is, and so pedagogically, we're really trying to give them the discretion on the ground, and I think that's helping ease some of the anxiety and also prepare us for what's the elephant in the room moving forward. And I think as we go day by day, really being compassionate and caring for each other, that's going to be really important from a relationship perspective as we go into some of these difficult financial situations. I can tell you here in the University of Georgia system, it's hit or miss in terms of enrollments at Georgia College. We've actually seen growth in our graduate programs across Georgia College and State University. College of Business has seen a slight uptick, just about a 2% increase in graduate enrollments. The undergraduate is down slightly, both across campus and in the College of Business. Proportionally, the College of Business is almost even, but it's slightly below. And our undergraduate admissions is pretty it's pretty rigorous process, and we have pretty high expectations, highly selective. And so we've seen those students take gap years, and we've seen those students decide not to come. I think for us, there's so much uncertainty of what's going to happen in the next couple of months and what the implications will be for the spring. And so it's really hard to answer that first part of the question. I can tell you the second part of the question, fiscally, 20% of Georgia College's revenue comes from auxiliary services. So if we were to move online, you can imagine what impact that would be for the university. 35 or so % of our revenues come from state allocation, and we get, of course, quite a bit from our tuition and annual giving and endowment growth. I can say that right now, I'm asking our chairs to be extremely conservative in their budget planning for this fiscal year and next fiscal year. And obviously, traveling is not happening this fall, and to some degree, we're not planning for it for the spring. There's a hiring freeze when it comes to staff positions, and the University of Georgia system actually right before COVID instituted a critical hire process. And I won't go into the details, but essentially I was speaking earlier about the centralized decision-making. It happens on the financial end too here. If we want to hire a faculty member, it goes through our university approval process, but also the system. So right now, I have 3 positions that I was hoping to be able to hire and to start the search process this year. And I know that one has been given priority, and we're crossing our fingers that will get approved. But I have to say, even in the spring, when Georgia College took a financial hit, that wasn't realized until later. And my anticipation is if there is any further financial hit, there will be a lag time for that. So, but I think we are seeing cuts to operations, cuts to potential cuts to operations, faculty development monies. And so I think there's a lot more pressure and opportunity for annual giving and fundraising for larger gifts. And so that's where a lot of my time has been redirected in that way. I don't know if I fully answered the long question, but yeah.
Barb?
All right. So is my sound better now?
Yes.
Okay. I'll have to steal Brandon's microphone permanently. So it is a very uncertain time, and I think that's what generates the anxiety. Similar to Michael's situation, the housing and auxiliary revenue is where the big hit is, and one of the reasons why we needed to offer face-to-face classes. We need students to live on campus. A lot of institutions are in this place where they've built these big, beautiful dorms that cost an awful lot, and they have an awful lot of facilities people that tend to these big, beautiful spaces, and they need people to live there. We were in the same spot. There were furloughs over the summer. We've been very fortunate that our enrollment is up, especially at the graduate level, and that's where I said that would come into play. We have companies that offer tuition remission, and they're still stepping up, and they're doing it, and they're putting through more students to our graduate programs. So those things are really, really helpful. Interestingly, we have a school of aviation, and they have an undergraduate program, and that is where our largest increase in students is right now. Isn't that interesting? I think that they figure that in 4 or 5 years when they graduate, that the market for pilots will be better. You see this, and you see all the headlines. Obviously, there's been staff furloughs, there have been pay cuts for staff and faculty across the nation and really across the world. But we have a hiring freeze, although we are putting our positions up, and we do hope. We're waiting to see what happens, if we can get through this fall, and crossing our fingers, yes, indeed. But I do think you've probably read all of the things that we're speaking about, the doom of higher education before the pandemic. And this has just made it come a little quicker, where we have to get leaner, we have to be more efficient, we have to think about how to provide the same services to students with less people. So, and in the same degrees, with more efficiency, less overloads, etc. So it came faster than anyone expected. I think, obviously, if we go into a major recession, usually the pattern is that more people enroll in school. Hopefully for higher education, that would be the case. It's going to be interesting to see if it is now. And we need obviously, private institution needs governmental support in terms of Pell Grants. And the dangerous trifecta is the fact that the cultural turn that's taken in our society to say that you don't need an advanced degree, that these are worthless degrees, that science and data is no longer necessary. So I hope that does not impact us even further if we do fall into a recession. Ken.
Thanks. I think one thing that's been impacting everyone is uncertainty. Even the incoming class for the freshman and graduate programs, we had projections as to what would happen, but nobody knows what happens until they actually show up in your doorstep, and then you can start counting and says, oh, did we meet our target or did we not? We are fortunate that we are able to meet most of our targets. Our graduate enrollment seems to be up a little bit. For our business school, we are doing better. Our numbers didn't go down. Actually, numbers went up just slightly for both undergraduate and graduates. So we're lucky, to say the least. We, as a whole college, have been very conservative in terms of how we budget. So for the past year, so until end of the last fiscal year, we had no cuts, no furloughs. However, starting up this fiscal year, we had to even budget even more conservatively. So we had some furloughs and some cuts in terms of salaries, benefits, and what have you, because we didn't want to budget, with a high expectation. We actually budgeted very conservatively. So now we're talking about if we do get excess funding at the end of the year, we may do something extra for faculty and staff, and bring back some of the cuts back to where we used to be. And obviously, we are having an in-person class because we do need to fill our dorms, and we are lucky that that since the infection rate is low here, we're able to fill most of our dorm. We're actually meeting our dorm capacity. So in terms of our budget for dorms, I think we came out okay. So financially, we're doing okay, but that's not universal across the board. There was an article just this morning on a local newspaper that there are many schools, even within the region, is actually having some financial difficulties. Now, they had financial difficulties before the COVID-19, but obviously COVID-19 made things worse for them. And now they're talking about some of them may not survive in the next few years. So, I mean, this is reality that we're dealing with. And I think some of you talked about having more flexibility. So I just wrote an article about what higher education needs to do in order to move forward. And one of the things I suggested was we need to, really make a revolutionary change in terms of how we deliver our courses, change our structural remove our structural impediments, and do things that are quite different. Otherwise, the things will actually get worse for a lot of the universities and colleges in the future. So I think the change was coming because everybody knew the number of students in terms of enrollment is declining, except down south, especially Northeast. We have had indication that our numbers will be going down in the future. So the change was coming, but I think the COVID-19 just accelerated the change. So it will be interesting to see how the schools and colleges respond to this type of change that's happening. Next, Erica.
Yeah, so I'll try to hit the high points, and I know you want to leave time for questions. So we, as everybody has said, have kind of been thinking about the decline in enrollment and concerned about that for some time. About half of our student population comes from out of state, the majority of that from the Northeast. And so as we see that decline, and we've seen over the years that's sort of been a concern. This just accelerated that concern quite a bit. As far as enrollment this year, we've been budgeting for a 15% decrease in enrollment, and we ended up, any other year, we'd be sort of like lamenting our enrollment because it is down. It's down pretty significantly. I'd say probably around 10% for the university, but we feel that's a minor success given that we've planned for 15 and had contingency plans for even higher than that, just not knowing what would happen. In the College of Business, we've been a little bit more fortunate, still down a little bit in enrollment, not as much as the university, and our graduate enrollment is up significantly. MBA enrollment is up probably about 30%, maybe more, literally bursting at the seams in that program, trying to find seats for students, trying to delay their enrollment to the spring, and having to really think about how we can manage those seats. So that's been kind of a bit of a buffer. In terms of cuts, I was trying to remember all of the questions. In terms of budget cuts, where we've seen, as I think most everybody has, the biggest budget cut, well, the most impactful, I guess, was staff-related reduction in force. Again, trying to right size or make ourselves a little leaner. That's been really tough. It's been tough professionally. It's certainly been tough personally to watch some of our staff leave our university and adjust to those changes. from the faculty perspective, the necessary reduction in the budget has been primarily managed through a complete loss of travel, as I think most people have. I think that's been perceived as fairly tolerable, given that most won't plan to travel anyway. So we've been able to allow some web conferencing support for development purposes to sort of account for that. And also in not filling previously frozen positions. So those things combined, so positions that were posted in the spring semester that were frozen ultimately never got filled, and that's resulted in some budget savings as well. I would not say we're technically, well, maybe we are technically in a hiring freeze, but it's not being discussed as we won't be able to hire. In fact, when we incentivized retirement, many faculty accepted the incentive, and so we lost faculty in that way. But the discussion wasn't that we would not replace them, and in fact, the discussion about the incentive and whether to approve it was the cost of the replacement. So the assumption is that we will replace these faculty where necessary. So again, targeted with a focus on need-based growth rather than sort of the place we've been operating in, which is, you know, somebody retires or leaves and we replace them and don't really question it quite so much. So I think we will be able to hire. Coastal's usually pretty late to the market relative to other institutions anyway. So I think we're just trying to see where the fall semester will land finally after it's all said and done and drop ads are done and the final payments are in, how many seats are filled, and that will give some insight into who we can hire and on what timeline.
I appreciate that. So I've got one more question that I do definitely want to get to, and then hopefully we don't mind if we spill over a few minutes just to see what other questions we might have from attendees here. But as difficult a topic as it is for many, we've seen universities enact furloughs, as we were just discussing, and worse, layoffs to faculty at many institutions. When hiring proceeds, not unlike the workforce in general, we're going to have a glut of competition between faculty seeking to regain positions from non-tenure track that lost their positions, and doctoral candidates that either have completed a dissertation or ABD, and all kind of coming to this climax of competing against one another for whatever positions end up kind of slowly come about in the marketplace again. So with that scenario, at some point in the future here, when do you feel that that timeline might occur for institutions beginning to hire again, if you have any foresight into that? And do you have any recommendations and advice for those respective groups? How can they differentiate themselves, whether they were an adjunct, a lecturer, on tenure track, but pre-tenure and let go, or a doctoral student just coming out saying, like, my God, look at this, workforce that I can't get a job in right now. What words of advice do you have to create those levels of separation?
So you did hear sorry, Michael, I interrupted you, but just to point out, I think you heard nearly 4 deans say that they're submitting their hiring list and hope to hire this year. I mean, if we can make it through, we still have hopes that this will be a normal cycle. So maybe it won't be as bad as Brandon says.
I'm sorry, Michael.
I don't. Yeah, it's so much uncertainty, right? That's the word of the hour. It's not normal. I think if we have the opportunity to do some of the hiring, we will, but the forecast is not positive. And I think it's just because there's multiple paths that we could end up going down. And, ideally we will be able to search for some positions, but as I put in the chat, we too are doing early retirement. And I just had a call with the chair this afternoon about a faculty member. And the degree to which we'll be able to refill that position is just up in the air. My advice to faculty that are going on the market soon is build those networks, and more so than you've ever done. I will put a pitch out for this organization, but in any of your professional organizations, engage, and go to the webinars. Make your, since most of the conferences are virtual, a lot of the conferences are more financially reasonable. Attend them. But I think, it depends on the point in your career. And I can't predict what's going to happen here, let alone in higher education moving forward. You know, if that makes any sense. And Ken, or no, it was Barb?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it all depends on what happens this fall and how fast we can get a vaccination and how many people take that vaccination, right? So we are, and actually talked to one of my executive advisory board members who said, CEO of an organization, and said, we are right now having 2 tracks of strategic planning. We have COVID strategic planning and we have regular strategic planning. So it's like a super short term to pivot on a daily basis based on COVID and what we want to do long term. And that's almost how I feel right now as a dean. Like, here's the current COVID plan, how we're coping and dealing with it. And here's what we want to do long term. We still cannot keep our eye off the ball of our vision. So, and we hope that it would be closer to the ideal, but maybe it will be somewhere in between. I was surprised when our provost said, submit to me the positions you want. I think she's in the same sort of boat, that we are planning for the best, preparing for the worst. So the uncertainty is what's striking us all. I'm watching the chat here that, and now I'm distracted by the chat here, but watching the chat, that it might be a trend, might very well be a trend, that we see more lecturers, clinical faculty, non-tenure track. And you know what? That's okay too. So if you get in that job and you prove yourself, then you'll still have an advantage when you apply for that tenure track job. And in fact, you may even have a chance, if you want to stay at the same organization, of converting later on to a tenure track role. I know they have that at JU. So I would not, I mean, I'm of the mind that I would do what I have to do, right? So if I'm teaching as an adjunct, if I'm continuing as a grad student, if I'm going to do what I need to do, but I'm going to continue while I'm doing it to build my resume, because the day will come, I hope sooner than later, that the market's going to open up again.
Ken?
Yeah. So unfortunately, because of the nature of the virus and pandemic, that any conversation we tend to become quite negative or quite down in terms of our emotion. And I do want to say that, the things are not great, but there are opportunities and there are hope when it comes to making a difference in terms of student learning, in terms of the opportunities for developing new programs. I think there is a lot of things we can do to help change the higher education. So I tend to look at not just looking at, oh my God, our numbers are this way, or our financial situation is not great, but let's look at the opportunities we can also have in terms of what we can make a difference, what we can improve, what we can change. And our faculty is actually picking up new skill set, because a lot of the courses that we used to teach happen to be in person, but now they're learning more about how to deliver courses online and learning about new technologies and new ways of doing things. So even after the COVID-19 crisis is over, my guess is that we'll never go back to where we used to be. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to change and make improvements. We have had hiring freeze, but what we're trying to do is be strategic, meaning that depending on what we are looking at, we just hired 2 new faculty in the college, and we are continuing to think about where we need to hire in order to make that progress for the future. So we're going to slow down, but we're not going to stand still. We're going to continue to move forward. And our president, we have a brand new president. She's actually studying our strategic planning process right now to really think about what we want to be 3 to 5 years from now. So I think, I think of this as an opportunity for us to change, opportunities for us to move forward, and bring that positive energy back to the campus. And I really enjoy having students back, because usually during the summers, the campus is dead and there is no energy. And now we have more energy on campus. I think there's opportunities and hope for the future. So I really think that we need to focus on not just on the negative impact of COVID-19, but what we can do to really make a difference, to make a change that could be that could actually have a positive impact for our students, our college, and higher education. Erica.
Ken should have gone last with that very uplifting, positive outlook on everything. I don't have a negative outlook. Actually, I agree with a lot of that. I think institutionally, there's just amazing opportunity that can come out of this. But I also think, as was mentioned earlier, what's going to come out of the post-pandemic, whenever that occurs, if that is such a thing, is kind of a focus on efficiencies. And so I think I am still hopeful that in terms of enrollments, that our typical trend around recessions where people go into higher education will benefit higher education. I don't know how quickly that rebound will come, but I'm hopeful that it will. But I also think that it was because of the trends in enrollment in higher education, and at least what we've experienced, were already in the works and were accelerated by COVID. I think that is going to be very presence of mind within universities, such that looking forward, when we do begin hiring, it will be around efficiency. So my advice to that point is largely building on what was already said, which is get your foot in the door if that's what's necessary, but also make yourself as flexible as possible. So whereas now faculty might be able to teach 3 sections of the same course because we have that many sections, that might not be the case going forward. You might find yourself being able to make yourself more marketable by being able to sort of be a little bit broader in your content, and also being flexible in your skill set, more innovative in your skill set, being able to demonstrate your use of, obviously, in this environment, online technologies, being able to demonstrate your effectiveness in multiple modalities and your flexibility in content. All of those things, I think, will make a desirable candidate going forward. Those are the things that we're going to look for, not just the specialist. And these are all contingent on what kind of schools you're applying to, right? What's a good fit for you? I'm speaking from the place of a fairly balanced institution where teaching is at least half your job. Research is important, but it's not an R1 institution. In those kinds of scenarios, teaching flexibility is going to be, I think, really more important perhaps than it is now, and being able to diversify in what you teach and how you teach.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we do have a couple of minutes, and if there are any questions, feel free to chime in, to post them at this time. We did fairly well in trying to nail this on an hour, to be courteous of everybody's time. But are there any other questions out there? You can unmute yourself if there is. Otherwise,
type it in the chat.
okay. If there's nothing else, I appreciate big thank you to our panelists, to Michael, to Barb, to Ken, and Erica for taking out the time to do this. This is something that we've wanted to do for a while. It's something that one of the really nice things that we've seen in recent years, over the last 5-10 years of MOBTS, is we have seen many of our members ascend into administration, into department chairs, into deans, and so on. So it's really great to see this group kind of moving up those ranks, and gives us new insights into academia, into what our membership should be looking towards, and in our efforts as an organization, and our mission to enhance teaching and learning across the management disciplines. So we're very appreciative of our Dean's panel here. We do have additional deans and administrators throughout the organization. So as we bring this together in the future, we will kind of rotate people through. Otherwise, please be on the lookout for other virtual events coming up, including our Inside the Manuscripts sessions. We'll be posting more about that coming up. If you did not check out our newsletter yet, it went out yesterday. You can please check your email for that. You can go onto the newsletter section of our website, or please join our Facebook group where it was also posted there. If you're not a member of the Facebook group, please join that if you are on Facebook, as that has, for the most part, really taken a large chunk of what used to be the email-based listserv. Many of those discussions and those questions and answers and everything are now posted on our Facebook group. So if there's nothing else, a big thank you to everybody for spending your evening with us. And we're closing up shop right at the 1 hour mark. And we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Take care.